Okay, well, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for attending tonight's MCLE. We're doing it on Document Automation 101. We're pleased to have Brittany Hernandez. She is the head of legal innovation at Gavel, and she'll give us a little background. But before I start, just a couple of things. Our meeting November 20, what date is it? November 21st is part 2 of this technology presentation. And the subject is generative AI versus rules-based automation. And like I said, I have no idea what that means, but she will tell us in November. There is now a state bar requirement for technology. You have to have 1 hour of technology. So we'll actually present 2 hours this year, but you have to have at least one. I'll again announce that at the end of this session, Jason will send everybody a certificate of attendance. And it's very, very important for you to get the credit, for you to sign it at the end and submit. And you have to press the submit button twice, not once, but twice. And then, so make sure you do that. I always print out the certificate just to keep it in case I get audited by the state bar, which has never happened, but it happened to my husband, John. So good thing to do. If you ever do get audited, Jan, our executive director, keeps all the certificates and the records. So if you do all your MCL through us, we always have a record of everything. We're always there in case you get audited to provide all the documentation you need if you don't keep it, because some people, as Brittany will tell you, are very paper adverse. It's a, not a paper world anymore. I'm old school. I print everything out and save it. And then, 10 years later, I find it in a stack of stuff. But, we're in a paperless world, really. What I'd like to do, too, is just remind, besides the November 21st date, which is part 2 of the technology presentation, November 12th, we have a mixer at 7 p.m. presented by the Legal Referral Board, and it is at Matt Denny's in Arcadia, and it is going to be we're going to honor Judge Harry Silberman. He's a family law attorney. I would encourage everybody, if they're interested, that they go to that. It'll be a fun night. I don't think we're giving an hour of MCLE for that. That's a social presentation. It includes dinner. It's like $30 for everybody. And they're going to have door prizes, giveaways, raffles. We've got sponsors. So it should be a fun evening. It was originally set in October, so we had to continue it. Then December 6th, we have our Christmas party at noon for the Eastern Bar Association. It's at Mountain Meadows Country Club, which is near the Pomona Courthouse. And it's a fun noon time luncheon. We do Judge of the Year for the Pomona Judicial District, Clerk of the Year, and Attorney of the Year, Lifetime Achievement Award, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping everybody can come to the Christmas party December 6th. It's a Friday at noon. And so with that, I'm going to, sorry, Brittany, for all the announcements. I'll shut up now, and I'll let you go. Tell us a little about yourself.
I will, for sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. And it sounds like you guys have a lot going on. So I hope to join you at other social events where we can actually chat a little bit more. But instead today, you get to listen to me talk for about 55 minutes. We're going to talk today about Document Automation 101. And I think this is a really good starting point for our 2-part series, as Lori mentioned, because we're going to go over the basics first in this one with the why, the what, the how, and the where to start for document automation. And then we're going to get a little bit more advanced in the second part, where we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between generative AI in your practice and traditional rules-based automation. And so when would you use each of those? So this is kind of to set us up for success for the second part. But we're going to take it slow. We're going to walk through each piece. But yeah, if you have any questions, my email is here as well. So we can always go over these things together.
And Brittany, there's a chat box too. So people can also pose questions in the chat box, and I monitor that and see if anybody has a question at the end.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, I can happily answer any questions now, but you can just have this email available if you think of something afterwards. I already got a slight introduction, but I just wanted to add that I am a lawyer. I'm licensed in California, so I am going through my own CLEs as well, always taking opportunities to get those. But I got really interested in legal technology after graduating, and then also got a master's degree in international film business. My practice area focused on intellectual property and entertainment law. And as a solo, I really understood the pain points that we all feel very acutely, because you're doing everything yourself. So I really needed to learn quickly how to be efficient with the way that I prepare documents, and especially in that kind of realm and space. I was reviewing a lot of contracts and drafting contracts. So this is really kind of where a lot of this stems from. And so I'd love to just show you and share some insights that I learned. And then in my new role now, more of the head of legal innovation at Gavel, is really just to help share how you can use these types of different technology in your practice in order to become more efficient, but also to increase revenue outside of the traditional billable hour. So for our agenda today, we're going to just really break these up into these different pieces and spend a little time on each one, focusing first on the why, what I call the 3 R's, the what, which are the 3 D's, which we'll go through, the how, which is around easy to use and affordable tools that you can consider to use to build automations for both internal use and client-facing use. So we'll distinguish between those as well. And then the where to start. Usually people will start with things like intake, engagement, payment, and any of your most used documents. So you're getting the most ROI, or return on investment, of your build time right away. So when we're talking about automation, we're just talking about the application of technology, programs, robotics, or processes to achieve outcomes with minimal human input. So we're just using technology so that we don't have to do a lot of manual entry of things that would repeat or be just vary from matter to matter or person to person, but otherwise the information is very similar. So why is it important to consider document automation, or just automation in your practice generally? This goes to those 3 R's, or the 3 reasons why we should automate. The first is to reduce wasted time, increase revenue, and reimagine the client experience. Let's just make sure everybody's on mute so we can, for the recording, keep it nice and clean. So for that first piece around reducing wasted time, this comes from both the firm's internal time as well as the client's time. So as I mentioned, we don't want to be doing anything where we already have information stored from the client, but we need to ask them for that information again on another form or whatever else. If we've collected that information once, we should be able to reuse that either internally or for our clients' use as well. So we really want to consider, how can we cut out these admin types of responsibilities and delegate that to technology, from the sense of we collect it, it's stored, and we can reuse or repurpose that information that's collected, both from our paralegals or for ourselves, and then for our clients as well. Increasing revenue is another piece of this for why we should automate. So this actually, since you're reducing wasted time, you're increasing the amount of time you have available to take on new clients, to do more marketing, to go out to trade shows, or whatever the other things that you need to do in order to advance your practice, can also bring in new clients and so on. New offerings is I'll show you a slide towards the end where I talk about the ways that lawyers are actually creating legal tech style businesses and offering client-facing flat fee products. And so they're able to offer different services or legal products, which are automated legal document forms that make it to where they're able to add a paywall in front of it. And so a client could go ahead and say, for example, complete a DIY divorce package, and then that is for a flat fee of some amount, let's say $400. And then they can take those documents and have them reviewed by an attorney. But we were doing this process of unbundling our services. So we're actually able to serve more people and increase the amount or scale the amount of people we can serve, because we're not having everyone be on this one-to-one model. We can actually be on a one-to-many business or revenue model. And then that kind of offering new services and products creates access to new markets, because you're able to hit price points that you couldn't really do if you were sticking to the traditional billing model of one-to-one and billable hour, because you're able to actually offer your services at a lower price because you're able to access more people at that price. So there's a huge market that's underserved because, and they call it the justice gap, because we have the people who have a lower income who are able to qualify for things like pro bono services or reduced fee services. Then you have people who are okay to pay higher amounts because they have higher income. And then there's this huge middle class market that is underserved because maybe they can pay some amount, but they can't pay quite as much as you might need to charge to cover your expenses in the traditional model. So that's the second reason why we might want to think about using automation or these types of productization tools like a gavel, for example, to increase revenue. And then the third is to reimagine the client experience. And I think this really comes from that possibility perspective. Now that we know how to use a tool like this, after I show you how, we're going to learn how to use this type of tool, reduce waste of time and increase revenue, but reimagine how a client interacts with a lawyer. So we can reimagine maybe having a client portal, and the client portal has all of their documents inside of it. And maybe they have access to a chat feature, or maybe they have the ability to drop their documents into a system or complete their own different like questionnaires or whatever else. So we can really think about the different opportunities that are available to us as we start to harness the power of using automation. And these tools are actually not very expensive, especially for the solo small firm market, because vendors know that you're not going to be able to pay an enterprise price. So it's really exciting to see what the different possibilities and emerging opportunities are. And I'll show you some examples of what that might look like throughout the presentation. So let's move on to the section around what. So this is around the 3Ds. And the question we're answering is, what would we automate, or what things can be automated? So these are just 3 examples of core categories of things that you might consider having automation around. The first is data, the second is documents, and the third is delivery. So when we talk about data, we're talking about obviously information about the person or the matter or the opposing party or whatever else. So when we think about automating data, we can think about the way that data comes to us. So incoming data, how the process of how that is collected actually makes a really big difference in how it can be reused. So when we talk about reused or repurposing data, we're talking about the fact that, let's say that you use a tool like Gavel or even like a Clio Grow to create some type of intake form, right? Or even your booking calendar when someone's going to book a consultation with you. What we would want is to be able to only collect that information, such as their name and their email and the source of where they came from and how they heard about us or what their matter is regarding, or all of those different pieces of information. We'd want to only collect that once, and in a way that allows us to then take that information when we want to prepare any documents for them or do any other follow-up with them, such as automated emails or even just whatever else. You're able to just say to your system, take that information that we already have and push it into this other thing that I want to do, such as create a power of attorney or fill out a FL 100 form or whatever the case may be. The third piece around data is around conditional data. So when we think about conditional data, this would be things like the rules that you're going through in your head when you prepare a document for a client, or let's say you're drafting a contract or you're preparing, let's just use the example of you're preparing something where it matters if the person has a spouse or children, for example. So maybe you would show you would say when you're preparing this document, you would go through and you would take out an entire page or an entire section or certain language if the person indicated that they were married or that they had children or a certain amount of children. So what you can do is actually automate not only the collection or the incoming part of that data, but the generation of the document to show or hide different aspects depending on one or multiple different conditions. So it could be, like I said, set up as a rule in your document to say, only show this entire exhibit if the person has indicated that their assets total is more than $5 million, whatever the case may be. So when we talk about outgoing, we're talking about information that you then take from your data manager or however you're storing the data, that source, and pushing that out to some other source, meaning like if you're sending a letter or an email to a client or an opposing party or opposing counsel, whatever else. So that's that one piece around data. And then we talk about documents. This could be, as I mentioned, internally prepared lawyer, like the things that you prepare as the lawyer or as a paralegal, someone in the firm. And then client prepared would be those ones that we want to have the client fill out the information so that we can then on the back end repurpose that information. And then you would think about what types of formats you would want those documents to be generated in or used initially. So for example, let's say a lot of the time your documents are prepared in Word. So you could take your Word documents, turn those into workflow automations, but have them generate on the end automatically as a PDF or as both, whatever you would need. Because sometimes people will use the tool to generate the first part of anything that would repeat or a lot of the different conditions, and then they go in and make tweaks by having the document generate as a Word document at the end. The final piece for the 3D section is around delivery. So that's how we're thinking about information coming in, we're repurposing or reusing it, and then we're delivering that to someone in some format. Like I said, we could do something where we automatically have a document emailed to a client on the resulting end of a workflow or form being run. Then we could have also this returned back into a secure client portal, or you could have this sent in the mail automatically, or whatever other delivery means you might need, depending on your process. So when we think about this, what should be automated, it can help to map out your own client journey. So when we talk about that, we're visualizing, how does someone hear about us? So maybe you usually get people who are referrals. Maybe you use a lot of strategies around YouTube or blog content or other types of lead generation types of tools. So you want to think about how might people hear about us? And then you could automate something like a nurture campaign from a marketing perspective of when a person enters their email to access this blog on our website, we want to send them a series of 8 emails over 8 weeks, once per week. That gives them a resource for them based on each different part of their journey. And you can automate that instead of you individually having to remember or calendar when to like manually send these emails out. Another one could be, for example, initial intake, discovery call, and conflict checks. So you can use technology to hit all of these different pieces, such as booking calendars, intake forms, and then for complex checks, you want to have something that is a single source of truth. So many of you or all of you on this call will usually have some type of system where you store data about your clients, like a legal practice management solution. And then you'll have, sometimes that tool will have, appointment calendars. So that's, if you're already using that, that's a good example of no longer are we kind of individually scheduling appointments with individual customers or clients where we're going back and forth and saying, what time works for you? Wednesday doesn't work for you. Let's do 10 a.m. So that process was one of the earlier things that got automated through booking calendars like Calendly or the appointment schedulers and like a Clio Pro, for example. Then we talk about client engagement. So the preparation of the actual engagement letter, and then also sending that off for e-signature automatically through DocuSign or another service provider. And then also going into, after we've engaged them as a client, we need to deliver on the services that we've been contractually engaged for, such as representing them in court or preparing certain estate planning documents or initiating the divorce for them or whatever the case may be. And then also the payment for those particular services can also be automated through something like a Stripe integration or a LawPay integration or other types of payment processors that can be part of your tech stack or the ecosystem of tools that you use in your practice. And then finally, you could think about how once you've closed out the representation, how you might want to upsell them to another package or service that you offer. And then also something called helping them turn into like champions or promoters, which are people who refer other people to you, giving you reviews on Google or wherever else, giving you referrals and so on. So obviously not every single lawyer is going to have this exact journey. It's just a general type of journey and a way of mapping out your process. So once you do this, you'd be able to see where there might be different points in your client's journey and your own internal process on the other side of this that could make it to where you're able to be more efficient in your practice and reduce the number of steps that someone needs to take in order to work with you. So let's talk a little bit now about how you automate different documents or just different parts of your process as a lawyer. So when I mentioned that these tools can be affordable, you could have plans that range from $83 a month, or if you need tons of features on some kind of tool like this, it could be $450 a month. It just really depends on how you want to work with it and what you're trying to do. But these are meant, all of these different tools that, we'll kind of see today are the people on the back end who are building it want you to be successful because they want you to use the product or the tool. So they try to make them very easy to use and to make them affordable so that you are empowered to build your own custom automations with your own custom templates, and then also be internal or client facing as we saw. So what Gavel is essentially is a tool that allows you to take your legal templates and turn them into a question and answer type of format that actually has or can have very robust conditional logic attached to different questions, different pages, and different sections of those documents. So that, like we said, you're able to really customize how that turns out for each separate matter or client, but you're also able to repurpose the data so you're not really entering information again that you already have, and also how you link that together, for example, with other information that you have stored, let's say like in a legal practice management solution. So I'll show you how something like this would work. So essentially when you have a Gavel account or a tool like this, you usually have something like a dashboard where you can manage, in this case, different what are called workflows. So workflows are just question and answer types of forms that you have created all of the different rules and logic and question like what the question says and what it looks like, because you have a lot of control over how this looks. So let's use an example of that kind of flow of the client journey and how that would look on the back end with you as the lawyer, right? So let's say that you're actually an expert in US veteran law. And one of the ways that you attract new people to your website and to your services as a lawyer is that you have a series of different blog articles that help in different areas, depending on what the person is looking for. And let's say that one of the things that you've built using a tool like Gavel is a lead generation and qualification tool that also serves as client intake. So the way that this would work, for example, is that you build something that is client facing, that the client actually interacts with, and not just you internally as the lawyer. And you'd be able to say, in this case, we are attracting them to our website. So that's considered lead generation. Somebody wants to know, comes to us over a competitor because they know that we have this tool that allows them to quickly and easily determine whether they may be eligible for a particular type of grant, which our service on the back end of that would be, if we wanted to qualify them for that, help them apply for this type of grant. So they have to answer just a few questions, and based on their answers, they're going to get different outputs. So in this case, we have the question, do you have one of the following service-connected disabilities? If they say none of the above, and they put in their information, such as their name and address, then they won't see this page around home information. It's going to get skipped because I've set up conditional logic in this document or in this workflow to say, only show the page that asks them about home information if they've answered anything other than none of the above. And the reason for that is if they've answered none of the above, then they likely do not qualify, because in this case, to be eligible for this type of grant, they have to meet all three requirements, which are to have a service-connected disability, to own or will own the home, and to be using the grant money to buy, build, or change their permanent home. So in this case, this person will receive this notification or this letter saying, dear Ms. Watson, based on your answers, you may not be eligible for this type of grant because to be eligible, you need to have a qualifying service-connected disability. These are the things that qualify. You indicated that you don't have any of these. You might qualify for something else, but likely not this particular one. So what's also happened, because I was mentioning that we can automate things like the delivery of this information via email automatically, for example. So this person indicated that their email was gavelpractice@gmail.com, and they automatically, because they ran this, had this email to them with personalized information. Hi, Mary, thanks for taking the time to fill this out. Attached is your decision letter, and you can see that letter is here. So that's why I was saying we don't have to manually go in and do anything. We should be able to have a lot of these different pieces automated. Now let's try a scenario where the person has some type of service-connected disability. So they would continue, but now they see a different page that asks for more information. And this is a good example of not wasting the client's time. If we can tell them in one question that they're likely not eligible, then we should tell them as soon as possible and not collect information that's not relevant to them. We should kick them out of this workflow as soon as possible because we don't want to go through and answer all these questions if they're not relevant. So in this case, we're going to ask this person 2 more questions based on their answers, maybe even just 1 more question, because if they won't be using the grant money to buy, build, or change their permanent home, they say no here, then it doesn't matter if they own or will own the home because they likely will not be eligible. Even though they have a service-connected disability, they're not going to be using the money for the right reasons in this case. So instead of seeing the bullet points that we saw on the other document earlier that were here, we still say you're likely not eligible. However, the reason is different because their answer was different. Now we see you need to be using the grant money to buy, build, or change your permanent home to qualify for this type of grant. This was also automatically emailed to this person with their decision. Now let's see a scenario where they say yes and yes. In this case, we're going to expect to see that this person may be eligible because they have a service-connected disability. They also are going to be using the money for the right reasons, and they own or they will own the home. So now we do see that. You may be eligible. We'd love to meet with you. Here's how you can book an initial consultation with us. Sincerely, the person that is on the case. So that is how we can kind of start to see how you can not only you can simultaneously attract people to your website or use something like this for a lead generation tool that is client facing. You can also use it to filter out people who may not be the best to work with you because of their answers based on maybe jurisdiction or age or certain types of whatever the conditions might be in your case for how you filter clients. You're just turning those into automated rules that can be run for people without you having to do anything extra, like get on the phone with them and ask them these questions, or send them an email and ask them these questions, through a series of back and forth. You can just have them automatically qualified through this type of process. And then finally, what's actually happening as well on the back end is this information is being collected in the data manager. So in Gavel, you can see that we can see all of the times that workflow, that particular questionnaire here has been run, people have answered those questions. We can see what those answers were. And if we wanted to, we could actually filter through this. So we could say, show me all the ones where the person's name was this or whatever else. We can open that session, copy the continuation link, or download the documents that were generated at the end from here. What we can also do is, as I mentioned on a previous slide, reuse or repurpose the data that was collected because it also served as a client intake form. Now we have the person's prefix, their first name, their last name, their email address, their address, and we can take that information and move it or repurpose that into something like an engagement agreement. So I can say push, and anything that would be the same from the first workflow into this one, such as the person's prefix, their first name, their last name, email address, and mailing address, will push over without us having to type anything. And then we can just answer any additional questions that might be relevant for this particular matter. In this case, what types of services will be included? This is an example of something called a repeating item, where you don't know in advance whether they have, let's say, if this was a question about children, you don't know if they have children at all. You don't know if they have one child. You don't know if they have 10 children. So this allows for variation from person to person and matter to matter. This could be something like shareholders or beneficiaries or whatever else. In this case, we're doing the difference between services that are going to be included in this representation and services that are going to be excluded in this representation. Then when we're done, we can review and make sure that all of the information pushed through into our template the way that we want it to be. In this case, we have Mary's name and email in different ways, as well as the title of the representation, today's date automatically pulled through, the different places where people's name need to appear, the services that are included and excluded. And then when we're ready to submit this for signature, we can say submit for signing, and that will automatically get sent to the client to DocuSign signature, collect their DocuSign signature in that case. I just want to pause for a second to double check if there are any questions. So feel free to add them in the chat whenever you think of them, and I'll just periodically check to see if there were any that were added. So we've talked a lot about the different ideas around data collection, data repurposing, lead qualification and generation, how we can turn that into lots of different pieces. But let's talk a little bit more about how you turn the documents into something like those questionnaires that I showed you. So we can do this with the help of a feature in our tool Gavel called Blueprint. So I'll show you how that looks. And then in our next session around more deeply into generative AI versus rules-based automation, we'll go into kind of like when you would use one over the other and so on. So let's say, for example, that we have this template and we want to turn this template into an automated workflow like I showed you. The easiest way to do this would be to go to your dashboard, go over to New Workflow. Under New Workflow, say Start with Documents. And what you can see is that you have three options: to start with questions, start with documents, or choose a pre-built workflow. And a pre-built workflow is something where there are a lot of standard forms in the law, as we all know. So there's like standard court forms, there's standard types of things that people prepare, like statutory powers of attorney or like different things like that. So instead of each individual attorney in each jurisdiction going through this process of automating those forms, Gavel has already built out some of these forms, these standard forms, in different jurisdictions that you can just use or have them added to your account. So you're not having to go through this process at all. Or you can start with questions, because sometimes the power of the logic itself is actually really helpful. So when I first made that workflow about the service connected disabilities, I didn't have a document generate at the end. I just wanted to walk people through the logic and the different branches of logic to lead people through to help them understand if they might be eligible for that. But I added the document later. So this might be a good candidate now for starting with documents. So do you need to generate those templates yourself? That's a great question. So the answer is you would start with documents that you use. So we don't have, for example, documents or templates in Gavel already that you would use to automate. You would take the ones that you have, your own forms and your own templates and documents, and turn those into automated workflows. Does Gavel work or integrate with most major website builders? That's a really good question. So the one that I created here and embedded on this website, this is a Softr website, Softr. So you can embed this in like Squarespace or WordPress. I think, oh, what's another one? Webflow, for example. So yeah, any of those kinds of major ones you can use to embed it, if that's what you mean. And you can clarify if I didn't answer that question the way that you were thinking. But yes, so you can have that be client facing through that as well. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Good. Good questions. So what I was saying is that you can, if you want to start creating a new workflow, you just say start with documents. If you want to start with your templates, that the question was, do you start with your own? The answer would be yes. So you would just say upload, or you would drag and drop it, find the different workflow that you want to add or start to automate. You can automate more than one at a time, and you can automate Word or fillable PDF documents in this case. You would say next, give it a name, and then it's going to just go through and analyze where the different parts are that might repeat. So for example, or be different from matter to matter or person to person. So here you would always need the lender's name for the particular situation. So the generative AI in this case is searching for those places that look like they might have a place that would be a good candidate to have a question about it. And then it's suggesting on the right-hand side here, I'm just going to move the Zoom window really quick. So the questions are being generated or suggested saying, for this section called lender name, you might be wanting to ask a question like, what is the name of the lender? for this section around what is the license number, or like this part that says license number, it looks like you're trying to ask what is the license number. And then the section around this for the borrower is also recognizing that this particular borrower name appears twice in the document, both here at the bottom and here at the top. So it's going to suggest that you consolidate that into a single question and just say, what is the name of the borrower? If you say edit question details, because it's not going to be perfect every single time, maybe there's going to be certain things that you would word differently. So maybe you would just say lender name with a colon or something, or it's also going to suggest something called a variable name, where a variable name is just a way to identify which question we're referring to internally when we're creating different workflows, or we're trying to add logic around something. We can refer to this variable name for that particular question. And then we can have different types of variables. Things like text means that we're going to be collecting text data in that field or in that question. Or, for example, we might need a number or a date or an email address or whatever else, where an email address is just going to help make sure that it's formatted correctly before it accepts the answer. So you can kind of see all the different things. You can go through and accept and reject a question very quickly through this process. And then when you're done, you would just say on the top right here where this black button is that says draft workflow. If you click on that, then the system is going to create that workflow for you with the different questions. And all you need to do is go through and clean it up to where you would want to have the title be what you would call it. So for example, it's just going to call it the name of the document in page 1. So maybe I would change this to anti-coercion. I actually just signed an anti-coercion insurance disclosure today because I'm buying a house. And I did all of my my notary appointment today. So it's just really funny that I actually used this today. So what we can see is now we're in a different view that we haven't seen before. So we've been in the dashboard and we've seen the live run link or the taker view of this particular type of document or workflow. But this is where you build workflows. So this is where I would say, for example, I want to add a new page and I want this to be for the lender's information. And I could then go here on the left and say, I want this to go on this next page rather than on the first page. And maybe I wanted to add another page about, or I wanted to have the lender's information appear first. You get to move things around and change it how you want. What you'll also see is that you could also add logic now to pages and questions. So I could say only show this entire page if the variable lender name, that's how I was saying variables refer to previous questions or other questions throughout the document or workflow. Like, so lender name is some value, for example. You can also do that at the question level to say only show this question if borrower name is some value. What we can also see is there's 3 tabs here: questions, document templates, and settings. And under document templates, we can see that this has already been automatically, this document with the different variables has already automatically been attached to this document. I'm sorry, this workflow. So what that means is if I download this and I open it, I'll be able to see that the system has done all of the coding for me to put what's called that variable in the sections in the format that the computer needs in order to read where the information should go. And all I would need to do is if I wanted to make any changes or add any logic, for example, I would just use what's called the word add-in. It looks like this. So you would just sign in. And now I can see the different workflows that I've created. In this case, I created one called Eastern Bar Association Anti-Coercion Insurance Disclosure. So if I wanted to add something somewhere, like I wanted to add the borrower's name here as well, I could say simple variables. I could look for the one that says borrower name, and then I just say insert variable, and that's going to insert that for me like this. Additionally, if I was going to say something like show this entire paragraph or section if some variable like the loan number is a certain value, in this case, let's just say blank, then I would just say insert that condition. And then now all I need to do to update this one, because right now it's not automatically like updating, all I need to do is go onto the toolbar on the left, on the right here at the bottom, and select a document to replace, in this case, this one here. And I would say update in Gavel. So that would make any of those changes automatically appear into the new document. Now, the final piece here would be that when I'm ready to actually use this, I would say run. In this case, you would usually, since you already would have created it at this point, you would go to your dashboard and say run. And then you'd be able to start using it. But in this case, I could fill out this form or this entire page, go through and answer all those questions as needed, and then whatever else, and then continue on to that final page where it would actually output the document for you like this with the information already, sorry, I flashed that really fast. Like this, where you have the information that is, put out wherever you needed it to go. So that's how quickly and easy you're actually able to create these. And then you would add, as I mentioned, any of those different pieces. I'm just going to quickly go back to my slides to show that we already talked about how you would do this directly in Word, but to point out that you could also do this with fillable PDF forms as well, if you use a lot of PDF forms in your practice. So before I go into, or I could go into this piece now, which is the where to start, we want to talk about how you would not only map out your process for the client's journey, but your internal process kind of on both sides. What's the client doing and what do I do and how could I do that more efficiently? So we talked about the intake side being that lead generation, qualification, having a call to action for an initial consultation, for example. So only for the people who actually answered the questions in a way that would allow us to actually help them or work with them, then we can ask them to book a consultation with us. We can do our initial consultation, do any conflict checks based on the other people they said were involved in the matter. And then we can go into that engagement, which I'll show you an example of how you can use this with data you have stored in your legal practice management solution. So we'll do agreement prep and e-signature in that example next. And then how you would do delivery and payment of the services or the documents that you prepare, and then paying for those services and document delivery. So before I go into the bonus ones, I'm just going to show you what this could look like. So I already showed you a little bit of how you would use this if you were just using Gavel by itself. So you can use Gavel all by itself, or you can use this in combination with other tools. So we integrate directly with Clio. So if you wanted to connect your Clio account, you would just sign in under this section here called integrations, and then you would just sign into your account. Now, what you're able to do is have access to all of the information about a matter, all of the information about particular clients, associated or related contacts, custom fields, whatever else. So let's say that we wanted to do a slightly different process. And in this case, we wanted to prepare an engagement agreement for that process that we talked about just now. All I would have to do is search for my person or my matter here in Clio, and I'd say continue. And then it's going to look at Clio and pull all the different fields that you've designated that you want them to, like where you want them to appear in your document. So I only had to choose the matter, and it pulled the date, the person's email, the name of the matter, preparation of a power of attorney. It's pulled in the amount of the representation or the compensation amount. And then all I would need to do now is submit it for signing. So that's a really good way to repurpose information that you already have. Another good example of this would be in the case of us actually preparing that statutory form power of attorney. I can run this and search for that person here, or I can go into my data manager, look for the workflow that I just ran around the limited scope engagement agreement, and I can just push that information into the next one, which would be the uniform statutory form power of attorney. Actually, this is the wrong one. Give me 1 second. This one here. So I would just push that information. It's going to, so we skipped that first page. We skipped this page because we already knew from that other workflow which matter we were choosing. So it just pushed us over to the next page, which is around the agent's information. And in this case, what's happening here is we've designated Bella as the agent. You could have this as a custom contact field. You could have this as a related contact, depending on how you like to have your process. I just met with someone yesterday who likes to have that type of person as a related contact, completely fine. But what you can see is her information, Bella's information, has automatically pulled through, including her address and her name, since we're going to designate her as the agent. If we wanted to have multiple agents, we could designate that as well by choosing that as our option. Now we want to designate what types of powers this agent can have. Either they get power over all of the different categories that you could see here, or we can select only certain ones based on our conversation with the client. So we choose which ones we want. Let's do personal and family maintenance, claims and litigation, whatever else. Then we have our final page, special instructions. So do we want this to continue if our client becomes incapacitated? Yes or no? And do we want to list any special instructions? Yes or no? And based on those answers, different things will show or hide in the document. And in this case, this was the original, actually, this was originally a PDF document, and I turned it into a Word document because it's just easier to like really get granular with how you want it, and you could take out all of the different instructions. So in this case, we're able to just quickly automate and generate this document. Now, we never even had to even touch the client's information because that already pulled through. We have the agent's information here, and we can see in our comparing original template that I otherwise would have had to go in and say, okay, let's put Olivia Lopez. Maybe I make a mistake here. 316. So we were able to generate the entire document faster than I was able to just start typing that, right? The other thing we can see is that instead of having this agents and attorneys, we can just only show that if there's actually more than one agent designated. We've also made it to where these different sections are only highlighted or have the initials next to them if they were designated. And also what we can see is that there was an entire section here on the exercise of the power of attorney where more than one agent is designated that is removed because we designated only a single agent. So that's how we're able to quickly and easily repurpose information, automate templates. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there are any questions. Okay, perfect. I think we have just under 10 minutes left. So I want to go into some emerging opportunities and examples next. Feel free to think of any questions in the meantime. Let me get back to my slides here. So we talked a little bit in the beginning around reasons to automate, and one of them was to increase revenue. And I wanted to show you what that looks like in practice. So now we know how to actually do the automating part. And once you understand how to do that and you start to build those out, you can start to realize the potential to just add a paywall in the beginning of that, have the client fill out the information. So they've already paid, they've filled out their information, and then the documents can get automatically emailed to you, for example, for final review. But you only have to do one piece of that. and they have the information that you need anyway, and you would just go through and answer any additional questions as needed. Or you can completely disconnect yourself from that and have it be a template service. So I'll show you what that looks like as well. To avoid things like unauthorized practice of law, you can see how you might want to structure this based on your own desires. So in this case, we talked about creating access to new markets and alternative ways to serve clients. So here are a couple of examples of people who are starting to do this. So instead of thinking about it solely in terms of document automation, think about it in terms as well of this idea of legal productization, or the productization of legal services. So you're turning your expertise and your services and your templates into legal client-facing products. So you can do this in different sectors, which could be things like business to consumer, where you're the business and you're selling this to a consumer. This would be a good example of Hello Divorce, where they have consumer-facing legal products like a DIY divorce package for $400. They are operating from, so they have a law firm, which is Levine Family Law Group, and then they have a separate entity called Hello Divorce that is able to provide services, or sorry, these different documents and workflows for a flat fee. Then you have something like a Docs, which is more of a marketplace style a la carte option for mortgage loan documents. So I'll show you what their plans, type of plans look like if you wanted to start considering how you could diversify your offerings to clients, and how you might change the way that you bill so you can scale your practice more. So in this case, we're in California, right? So we would say I'm filing California. You could say I'm considering a divorce, I'm ready for a divorce, or my divorce has been final or filed or finalized. And in this case, what Hello Divorce has done, where Aaron Levine has created this separate entity that sells packages to consumers or clients, is have, for example, a DIY plan, where I said, for example, that they use a Gavel workflow on the back end here to allow their clients to fill out these forms, pay the fee, and then they would file themselves. If you wanted support, such as one spouse leaves the process, they have a dedicated specialist, the forms are checked for accuracy, the service or company, Hello Divorce, will file and serve for you and deal with the court for $1,500 with payment plan options. Then you have at the higher tier a mediation plan, which also includes things like 5 hours of mediation. You get to choose your mediator specialty, whether they're an accountant or therapist or co-parenting expert. So you can see how you would be able to think about ways that you could diversify the way that you offer your services to clients, or have a completely separate entity like Docs too, where they just offer certain documents at flat rates. So for example, if somebody wanted to order a business purpose loan document in a certain jurisdiction, such as in this case, California, they could do so for $399. In another option they could do is a pre-negotiation agreement or a loan default letter. And I get asked a lot, how do they structure this? So this section down here on the bottom left is really useful. They say, we're proud to say that the documents generated by this website are licensed from DOS Law LLP. We believe that they are the best. However, DOS Law LLP does not prepare the actual documents users create on this website. Use of this website does not establish an attorney-client relationship with DOS Law LLP. A user's relationship is solely with DOS LLC, a non-attorney. Nothing on this website should be construed as legal advice. Final documents generated on this website should be carefully reviewed by each user and its legal counsel before use. And then they have a terms of use and a privacy policy. I'm just going to quickly check this question. So if after a year of effort, you find the system is no longer effective for your practice, perhaps just due to the nature of your practice, does the firm have a way to retrieve the data? A variation on the problem is, does the program remain active after an attorney discontinues? That's a good question. So you have, like I said, that data manager where you have your information. So we could export that. And then if you needed to close down your practice or whatever else, then we can make sure based on your preferences that it's deleted right away or whatever else. You would just need to reach out to our team to make sure that, you know, however you wanted that to be closed down or however you wanted the information to be moved, you could do that as well. Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to start to wrap up. I saw Lori kind of pop up on my side window, so I know I'm almost
That's a hint.
That's my hint. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to just thank you for your time. Again, my name is Brittany Hernandez. You can reach me at brittany@gavel.io. And if you're interested in learning more about Gavel or how to use document automation, you can reach out to me. You could also just go to gavel.io and start a free trial. If you wanted to. We're also having promotions at different times, so you can reach out to me and I'll give you a promo code for some discounts.
Brittany, I have a quick question on the November MCLE on technology, generative AI versus reality-based automation. Just give us a preview what that's about.
Sure. Yeah. So that's the idea. Like I showed you how you can go through and add different rules. So that's a very static process, right? Like you are deciding which things go where and you have a lot of control. And then generative AI is a lot more about generating new suggestions and new things. So you're just trying to understand, I'm going to tease out for you when you might use one over the other or how you might use both together.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? If not, we're going to say goodnight. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate it. Just again, a couple of reminders. November 12th, Mixer at Matt Denny's in Arcadia. It should be a great evening honoring Judge Harvey Silberman. And that'll be at 6 p.m. at Matt Denny's and includes dinner, door prizes, raffles, all kinds of things. It should be a fun evening. It's totally a social evening. And then December 6th, Friday, the Christmas party at noon for the Pomona judges in court, honoring them and local attorneys. And we may do something for Jason, our webmaster, too, whether he wants it or not. So those are the two things coming up. And then I'll talk to the speakers in January, February, March, and I'll let you know that in the November meeting. All right, thanks everybody. Abby, if your students want to be on for the November presentation, let me know. And I'll work on the January. Okay?
Thank you. Yeah, we would love that, Lori. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Signing off, Jason.
What was that?
Signing off.
Oh, signing off. I do have next month's event already available on the website for sale. So if you want to sign up for next month, November 21st, it's up and ready.
Okay. And we comp the paralegals. So they're free for Abby and her paralegals. Brittany, thank you. Have a good evening.
Of course. Thank you
See
so
you in
much.
November.
Bye, everyone. See you in November.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.